She didn't wear designer heels, carry a famous name, or have a powerful family, but she was the one who taught him how to love. In front of everyone, she was treated like she was nothing, as if her place was in the silence, in the corner, in the shadows. What none of them knew was that the heart of the heir to that entire fortune beat just for her, not out of pity, but out of truth. And when the mask of arrogance finally shattered, it was the truth that spoke loudest, with a single sentence. And the world silently fell apart. It was late afternoon in a neighborhood where the houses looked like pages from an architectural magazine. Immaculate lawns, invisible fences, and gold-leaf invitations for a party that reeked of status. Inside the Blackwood estate, pastel balloons floated like promises of a perfect childhood. It was the 7th birthday of Liam, the only son of businessman Harrison Blackwood and the socialite Veronica, his second wife. Waiters circulated with delicate trays. Children in custom-made costumes ran across the lawn, and the adults watched it all, parading themselves between smiles and champagne. Grace was there, in a simple dress, her hair pulled back, and with a look in her eyes that had already seen more than it wanted to. She followed a few steps behind Liam, just as she always did, attentively, carefully. She wasn't just a nanny, she was a constant presence, a comforting silence. Liam, however, didn't see her the way the others did. To him, she was a safe harbor. She was the one who knew the right time for juice, the right time for a hug, the words his father never said and his stepmother didn't know how to offer. While everyone else spoke loudly, Grace was the one who knew how to listen. But that afternoon, as the party reached its peak, there was a strange tension in the air, as if someone was about to cross an invisible line, and there, amidst the manufactured laughter, a truth began to press in on them. A truth that no one there could have imagined, but that already lived in the little boy's eyes. Veronica moved as if she were floating. High heels, a form-fitting dress, and a smile that only appeared when a camera was near. She couldn't stand Grace. She would say between the lines that she was fond of her, but she never let her sit at the table, nor did she ever call her by her name. She preferred the nanny, the help, that one over there. Harrison, the patriarch, was more discreet in his coldness, the kind of man who confused politeness with a loss of authority. Grace had worked for the family for 6 years. She was never late, never complained, but she was also never truly seen. Liam, despite his age, noticed. He saw how Veronica referred to Grace as if she were an object, how she kept her from getting close when guests were around, and how his father would say nothing, staring into space with his glass always half full and his soul always half empty. That afternoon the tension began when Liam wanted to get out of the bouncy castle to have a snack. Grace, with her usual care, reached into her bag and pulled out a small container. It was something she had made at home. A banana muffin that he loved and that wouldn't trigger his allergies. That's when Veronica approached, with 2 guests at her side. She saw the scene and her brow furrowed. The cutting glare came before the words, "Is that something you give a child at a party like this?" The guest's laughter was automatic, but Liam didn't laugh. Neither did Grace. Right there, in that moment, the atmosphere began to shift, and respect began to vanish. Veronica took 2 steps forward, a forced smile on her lips, but her eyes filled with venom. She snatched the muffin from Grace's hand as if it were trash and dropped it onto a passing waiter's tray. "So sorry, everyone. Sometimes the staff forgets their place," she said, looking at her guests. One of them chuckled. The other just looked away. Grace stood motionless, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. She felt her face flush, her palms sweat, but she maintained her composure, as she always did. She was used to swallowing insults, but this one came with an audience. From a distance, Liam saw it all. He was about to run to her, but Grace just gave him a look, a silent plea for him to stay put. She didn't want him caught in that line of fire. Veronica turned back to her and spoke louder, just to make sure everyone would hear. The next time you bring food from home for this child, I will throw you out myself. Do you understand?" Grace nodded, swallowing hard. Her eyes welled up, but no tears fell. The waiter who took the plate gave her a rare look of solidarity, but no one said a word. The silence of the well-dressed crowd was louder than any scream. And on that afternoon of celebration and hypocrisy, one thing became clear. The world Grace lived in was the corner of the room, always on the margins, always one step away from being sent packing. At the end of the party, as guests were saying their goodbyes and the balloons began to sag, Veronica made a point of staging one final humiliation. She called Grace over in front of 2 security guards and, in a calculated tone loud enough to echo through the hall, said, "As of today, your services are no longer required. You are no longer welcome in this house." Liam heard it. He ran to her, desperate, and grabbed her hand. "Why? She didn't do anything. I just ate the muffin," he cried, his eyes flooding with tears. Veronica rolled her eyes. "Because you need to learn to be around people of your own class, Liam. Not people like that. People like that." 3 words that cut deeper than any slap. Harrison only appeared afterward, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt as if he'd been interrupted from something more important. "It's probably best if you go now, Grace. I appreciate your time here, but it's for the best." There was no hug, no gratitude, not even a final paycheck was offered in that moment. Grace looked down at Liam with tenderness. She knelt, straightened the collar of his shirt and whispered, "Be a good man, even if they teach you to be anything but." The boy was now crying silently. She left, carrying only her purse, the empty container in her hand, and a dignity that, though wounded, was still standing tall. The security guards escorted her to the gate, as if she were a threat, as if loving a child that was no longer hers to care for was a crime. Grace walked down the street without looking back, and behind her, the mansion's gate clicked shut with a sharp, final sound. It wasn't just the loss of a job, it was the brutal severing of something much deeper. Have you ever seen someone treated like garbage, just because they weren't born with the right last name? If this scene made you angry or left a knot in your chest, comment yes below, just to show there are still people out there who feel, people who refuse to stay silent in the face of this kind of injustice. The neighborhood was different. The streets had potholes, the walls had peeling paint. But here, Grace could breathe. She shared a small duplex with Rose, her ailing mother, whose eyes were often downcast and whose hands trembled when she sewed. It was Rose whom Grace relied on now, not for help, but for strength. Days passed, then weeks. Grace would wake up early, make coffee for 2, take her mother to the community clinic, and at night, she picked up shifts at a small laundromat in the neighborhood. Folding strangers' sheets, smelling soap all day, handling laundry that wasn't hers. It wasn't about pride, it was about survival. No one knew where she was. And she didn't allow herself to think about where her heart was, especially the boy's heart. But he didn't forget. Liam tried to write notes, hide letters in his notebooks, ask the driver to deliver them. They all disappeared before they could ever reach her. Veronica, suspicious, monitored even his drawings, and Harrison, as always, pretended not to see. And so, more time passed than any of them expected. Liam grew up. He became a quiet, polite teenager, but with a spark in his eye that no one could place, except for him. At 17, he started saving money in secret, selling digital art pieces he created himself. The talent, they said, came from his mother. The dead mother no one ever talked about, but he knew. He knew his biological mother hadn't died. She had been erased, expelled, buried alive by a convenient silence. One day, after getting off a crowded bus, Grace stopped in front of a small fabric shop. She was there to buy some material to mend her mother's blouse. But it was there, on that gritty street corner, that her eyes met his. Liam looked different, tall, handsome, with Harrison's features, but Grace's heart. "I've been looking for you for years," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Grace let her shopping bags fall to the ground. She could hardly believe it, but she knew. She knew that this boy was hers, not by blood, but by soul. Because a mother isn't the one who signs a birth certificate. It's the one who endures everything, in silence. 2 months later, the Blackwood estate woke up to a different kind of mourning. There were too many flowers, too many waiters, too many guests. Harrison was turning 60, and Veronica was throwing a party that felt more like a celebrity awards show. Everything was impeccable, except for the mood between father and son. Liam, now nearly a man, walked through the halls like someone carrying a secret. His eyes were watchful, but his posture was firm. He wore a simple suit, one he'd chosen himself, and in his inside pocket was a handwritten letter from Grace. It was his idea to ask Veronica for a moment to speak to the guests. He said it was a tribute to his father. Vain as ever, she loved the idea. And at 8:30 sharp, everyone fell silent to listen to the air. Liam walked up to the small stage set up in the garden. He took a deep breath, looked around, and released the words like a truth that had been hurting him for years. "Before we make any toasts, I'd like to introduce someone. The woman who truly raised me, the one who taught me how to be a decent human being, even when I was surrounded by people who only taught vanity." Glances were exchanged. A few people chuckled, expecting a joke. That woman who many of you here treated as if she were invisible, as if she were less. And then he pointed toward the entrance. "She's here tonight, and it's time you all knew the truth. That nanny you all humiliated. She is my mother." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was deafening. Grace entered slowly, a simple dress, a serene expression. She walked through the guests as if floating, not to show superiority, but to show she no longer had to bow her head. Veronica brought a hand to her mouth. Harrison turned pale. Liam stepped down from the stage and extended his hand to her, and in front of everyone, he led his mother to the center of the lawn. No shouting, no revenge. Her presence alone was the answer. Grace stood there, in the middle of the garden where years ago she'd been treated as disposable. But now, no one dared to look away. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. She just looked at Veronica, who could barely hold herself up on her heels. And then at Harrison, who finally understood that no amount of power in the world could buy back lost respect. "I didn't come here to demand anything," Grace said, her voice steady. "I just came to show you that everything you tried to bury survived." She looked at Liam with a tenderness only a true mother can offer. And it grew up beautifully. There was no applause. It wasn't the time for that. But there was no longer a silence of contempt either. There was something new. Shame, respect, and a certain kind of admiration that is only born in the presence of true dignity. Grace turned and walked away with calm steps. Liam followed, walking beside her, just like he did when he was little, as if in that moment he was taking back what should never have been taken away. His real family. At the entrance, a waiter opened the gate for them, his eyes glistening. Grace thanked him with a small nod, and as she crossed that threshold, she left behind what had hurt her, but not what had made her. Some truths don't scream, they wait. They wait for the right moment to stand up and calmly put everyone in their proper place. Grace never needed revenge, because life has a way of returning what is just. At the perfect time, sometimes, in front of the very same people who once mocked you out loud. And that's exactly what happened there. A woman who left in humiliation, returned with her head held high, without needing to step on anyone to do it. The world loves to measure a person's worth by their bank account or their family name, but the only inheritance that truly changes a destiny is affection, is presence, is the love that remains even after the door has been closed. Liam wasn't shaped by the mansion. He was shaped by the steady hands that loved him in silence. And that is what he chose to honor, because in the end, true nobility never comes from a fortune. It's born from the courage to love without expecting anything in return. If this story moved you, or made you think of someone who has also been made to feel invisible, hit that like button. It shows that stories like this still matter. And let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I read them all with care and reply whenever I can. If you believe in the power of stories that connect with the heart, subscribe to the channel. Every subscription is what keeps this journey alive. And don't leave just yet. Choose one of the stories appearing on your screen now. I'll see you in the next video.